Well, Prynawn da, good afternoon. I'm very pleased indeed to be joined this afternoon by Dr. Sally Lewis. Dr. Lewis will be giving you a personal insight into what it has been like to be part of Wales's biggest ever vaccination programme. And I'm going to begin just by outlining the latest position of the programme. At the beginning of December, Wales became one of the first countries in the world to start vaccinating people against coronavirus. And that was a very significant step, marking a real turning point in the pandemic. Today, just 66 days later, I'm incredibly proud to say that we have achieved the first milestone in our vaccination strategy. And what that means is that we have offered vaccination to everyone in the first 4 priority groups. That's everyone over 70, all frontline health and social care workers, everyone living and working in an old person's care home, and everyone who are clinically extremely vulnerable. Now, this has been a phenomenal effort, and it is thanks to the hard work of the thousands of NHS staff, volunteers and military personnel across Wales who have been vaccinating people every day of the week in the mass vaccination centres, GP practices and hospital sites. Take-up of the vaccine in Wales has been incredibly high, and the very latest figures, which were published at midday, show that in total, more than 715,000 people have already had the first dose of the vaccine. But we want to make sure that nobody from those first 4 groups is left behind. So, if you've changed your mind about having the vaccine or missed your appointment because of illness, you haven't missed out on your chance of having the vaccine. The NHS across Wales is checking and rechecking its lists to make sure that nobody has been missed out, and we'll continue to invite people to come forward throughout the weekend. Every health board has dedicated phone lines and email addresses for people in these first 4 groups to get in touch to arrange an appointment, and we've put these on our website too. So please, if you know of anybody who for any reason is still to be invited for their vaccination, help us to help them to come forward. Now, today of all days, as we reach this important milestone, I wanted you to hear directly from one of the people who has made all this happen. And I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Lewis, who is a GP, the clinical lead for the National Vaccination Programme. Dr. Lewis.
Thank you, Minister. We've never seen mass vaccination at this scale and speed before, with close to 750,000 people receiving a dose of vaccine over an 8-week period up to the middle of February. And so I wanted to give you a sense of what that was like on the ground, and also as a huge logistical exercise. Because what this means in practice is that we've had to deliver a 2-dose regime for 2 very different vaccines, which have very different sets of characteristics. And we've also had to think about how we coordinate the second dose within quite a precise window, and also coordinated across multiple vaccination sites. So you'll appreciate a huge logistical exercise to be done in a very short space of time, safely and effectively. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing, of course, is we have to ensure that we've got the capacity to reach all of the eligible groups as quickly as possible. And one size doesn't fit all. That's why we've got a mixed vaccination model using mass vaccination centres, GP practices and wider primary care, community venues, and later on community pharmacy, because we need to vary our offerings so that we meet the needs of local people and geography, which will obviously vary across Wales. So in thinking through the capacity, we've had to really think about local planning and quite dynamic planning between health boards and primary care. And it's really, really important that we keep those lines of communication open across the system so that we can coordinate this across multiple models of care and vaccine delivery. We also need to optimise the number of vaccinations that we're giving in each setting. And as a GP, I know that we can really learn from my GP colleagues on this, who've been very efficiently vaccinating for many years, of course, in flu campaigns every year. We also need to pay attention to groups where uptake is lower and really keep a close eye on the data there, whether that's due to vaccine hesitancy or other reasons. And I was speaking to colleagues just yesterday in Newport West, doing some really great work on outreach with community and faith leaders about how we increase confidence where there is vaccine hesitancy. We have to go as fast as we can, but also we have to avoid inequity across eligible groups or by geography. And that's why the mixed model of vaccine delivery is so important. So the other thing I wanted to say was when we see vaccination on the TV, most people see vaccine going into a person's arm, but actually to get to that point requires a huge number of people in planning to match the provision, the delivery of the vaccine with the supply that we have, which, as you know, has been variable at times. The administration tasks are huge and often at very short notice as the vaccine comes in and we want to get it into arms as quickly as possible. Our informatics colleagues are working 7 days a week to make sure that the Welsh immunisation system is working both for scheduling and for capturing the data around who's been vaccinated. Pharmacists managing supply, our vaccinators and volunteers, of course, and local partnerships with local authorities, third sector, police, and our army colleagues have all been invaluable. So in short, it's a huge multidisciplinary collaborative effort which we need to continue over the next 6 months to really get ahead with this programme. And I just want to finish with a little bit of how this feels for myself and for my colleagues in NHS Wales. When I did my first mass vaccination centre shift on December the 17th, I had a conversation with some care home staff who had really been isolated in their care home with resident for months and months and months. And their joy and our joy at being able to give them some hope for how things are going to get better as we come out of this pandemic. You know, I can't describe that feeling to you. And I know that everybody that's involved within the vaccination programme feels exactly the same as I do. Thank you.
Well, Sally, thank you very much indeed for that real insight into the complexity that lies behind the programme and the huge sense of a team effort, a real Team Wales approach that lies behind the figures that we're reporting today. More than 1 in 5 people in Wales already having had the first dose of the vaccine, and that is the result of all those extraordinary efforts that you've heard about. And, you know, the praise and the thanks lies absolutely with those people at the front line and all those behind them who have allowed that to happen here in Wales. And now, as you heard Dr. Lewis said, the hard work goes on as we move to the next priority groups, while also providing second doses. Now, we know that over the next few weeks, we will see a slight reduction in the amount of vaccine we receive, especially compared to the levels we've had over the last very busy few weeks. But we know about this. It's a planned part of the programme. It is an issue that is the same right across the whole of the United Kingdom. We have factored this into our vaccination plans. It won't affect people's appointments. It won't delay when people are due to get their second dose, and it will allow us to go even faster later in the programme. Over the next few months, we will be offering vaccination to everybody in groups 5 to 9 of the JCVI list. Everyone aged between 50 and 69, everyone over 16 who has an underlying health condition which puts them at increased risk, and a great many unpaid carers who provide care for someone else who is vulnerable to the virus. Once again, I say to anybody in those groups, please take up the offer of vaccination. It is safe and effective. It protects you, and it will help us all in our effort to protect one another. So at the same time as we have seen the fantastic progress with vaccination, we are also seeing rates of coronavirus continuing to fall across the country. And that is thanks to the hard work of everyone here in Wales over the last few months. I know that this has been a huge challenge for so many people living through lockdown again. But we all need to keep on working together to push infection rates even further down while our vaccinators carry on doing their vital work to protect people. And then we can be ready for the future, a year in which things can get better. And a Wales where we learn the lessons of coronavirus and shape a future together which is ambitious and outward-looking, but where we are always looking out as well for those who have been the hardest hit. That is why we will start by bringing our youngest children back to school after half-term. That's why we will go on supporting businesses across Wales, and that's why today we are celebrating the successes of our National Health Service. Thank you. Thank you all for everything you do to help us to keep Wales safe. Diolch o galon I chi gyd. We'll now go, as usual, to questions, and as usual as well, all the answers will be broadcast on our own social media channels. And the first this afternoon is to go to James Williams at BBC Wales.
Diolch yn fawr, Prif. Gallai gael yr ateb yma yn Gymraeg hefyd, please. Can I get this answer in Welsh as well, please? Can I start with the next milestone then for the vaccine rollout? Boris Johnson has said that he hopes that in England they'll hit that next milestone, all 9 groups, by the end of April. Is that the sort of timescale you're looking at as well? And are there any more foreseen problems, or not problems, but issues with the supply coming in the next few months, or is it just this particular period?
Well, James, thank you. We will say something more specific than we've said so far. Our target is to complete the next 5 groups by the spring. Once we've got through this next couple of days, and we're completely certain that the first 4 groups are behind us, then we will say something a little more definite about when we expect the 5 groups to be completed. We don't have any indications of any further hold-ups in vaccine beyond the slowdown we know over the next couple of weeks. The UK minister responsible for vaccine supply has said there will be some lumps and bumps in the road, so I suppose we have to anticipate that. But our plans are based on what the UK government has been able to tell us about the weeks ahead, a small slowdown over the next couple of weeks, an accelerating supply of vaccine during the month of March, enough to give us confidence that we will remain on track to complete all 9 priority groups within the time frame we've laid down. So just i ddweud, beth ni wedi ddweud yn barod yw ni'n mynd I cwblhau popeth am y 9 grwpiau gynta cyn diwedd y Gwanwyn. Ar ôl y penwythnos, pan ni wedi wneud popeth ni'n gallu wneud I dod y 4 grŵp gynta i'r ben, ni'n mynd I ddweud rhywbeth fwy penodol am pryd ni'n disgwyl ni'n gallu dod i'r grwpiau nesaf, y 5 grwpiau nesaf i'r ben. Ac hyn o bryd ni'n cynllunio dros wythnosau sydd I ddod. Mae'r Llywodraeth yr Uned Unedig wedi ddweud ato ni, bydd Brechlyn yn dod ato ni. Mae cwpwlau o wythnosau sydd I ddod pryd bydd faint o'r vaccine sydd 'da ni yn mynd I lawr peth bach, ond bydd hwnna yn mynd I helpu ni yn mis Mawrth I gyflymu ar raglen sydd 'da ni, a ni'n cynllunio a ni'n hyderus ni'n gallu wneud hwnna.
And again to you, First Minister. You've said in the last few weeks that you potentially could see a pathway towards reopening the tourism sector in Easter, so the start of April. Can you just paint us a picture of what the next few months then, or the next 6 weeks or so look like? Are we unlikely to see major changes in our personal lives until Easter?
Well, James, the way that I am trying to think of it is this. Provided, and this is a very big proviso, provided we continue to see levels of infection fall in Wales, that we see the impact on our health service being drained away, and we see our vaccination programme delivering what we hope it will do in terms of the protection it will offer to people, if that is the path we are on, then the pattern in Wales as we move towards the spring and Easter will be one in which we will be able, slowly and cautiously, lift the restrictions that are currently in place in all aspects of our lives. And that will include the tourism industry, and it'll include those aspects of family life which are denied to us all at the moment. But that is a path that depends upon continuing success. And we've learnt so often, haven't we, over the last 12 months, coronavirus continues to have very unpleasant surprises up its sleeve. We're by no means guaranteed to have a smooth passage into the future. And we in the Welsh Government, we will remain alert to any of those changes. But we're planning on the basis that things will improve, because they have improved so significantly ever since the start of the new year. James, thank you very much. Over to Rob Osborne at ITV Wales.
Thank you, First Minister. A number of viewers have contacted us today who are in those 4 first priority groups, saying they haven't been contacted at all for a vaccine. It's not a case of missing an appointment or anything like that. They haven't been contacted. Why might that have been, and what should they do about it?
Well, Rob, it is very good news that they have contacted you, because that will now allow us to contact them. Because the NHS, in every part of Wales, is spending this week checking and rechecking whether there are any people who have missed. Now, there may be a whole range of reasons why that could have happened, and I can't really probably speculate on them. But anybody, and this part of my purpose in doing the press conference today is to say, anybody who knows of somebody who may have missed out, it is not too late at all. We will make sure that those people have an appointment. They will get it as fast as possible. I know that Sally has been involved in work this morning to make sure that is happening in her part of Wales. However people draw that to our attention, and be very grateful to have the details from you, that means we can contact them and get the vaccination that we all want to see out to those people.
My second question is also on the future. People have put the vaccine as a way of getting out of this crisis and the return back to normal life. I wonder if you could define to us what a normal life looks like. Does it mean wearing masks for a lot longer? Does social distancing go on for years to come? What does normal look like?
Well, I'm certainly not going to look ahead for years to come. It's difficult enough thinking of the next 3 weeks. Look, what I would like us to be able to get back to in Wales, and more quickly than we were able to last year, is the way things were last summer. So last summer, we were still social distancing. We were still being asked to wear masks on public transport and in crowded places. But we were able to travel. Restaurants were open. People could go on holiday. So coronavirus is going to be with us for months to come. It's going to be, as somebody said to me recently, a long goodbye. Even when it's in the rearview mirror, we will need to go on being careful about the way that we live our daily lives. But if we could get back to the way that things were back in July and August of last year, could get to there more quickly than we were able to do it last year, I think people will notice the difference very significantly in their lives, and will be prepared to go on doing the small things that we all can do, because they do make cumulatively a real difference, while allowing us to reopen those parts of life that matter so much to us all. Rob, thank you very much. Drosodd I Adam Hale, PA.
Diolch yn fawr I chi. On the planned reduction in vaccine supply over the next few weeks, which of course will see some vaccine centres temporarily shut their doors, is this the sort of situation you were indicating to last month when you said that it would be damaging not to spread out the vaccine supply and potentially have vaccinators standing around with nothing to do?
When I was referring to that, I was referring to the fact that we needed to make sure that we use all the supply that we have in the most effective way we have. Now, we have used every drop of that supply that we had at the time that I was speaking about that. And, you know, it is inevitable in the complex world of vaccine supply that when factories need to be re-geared so that they can produce even more, that there will be some temporary reductions in the volume that we have. But the important thing to say today is that none of this is unexpected. We know about it. It's the UK-wide pattern. Wales is not being singled out for a reduction in any way. And the changes that are going to be made over the next couple of weeks really will help us because they will accelerate the supply of the vaccine in March and April, allowing us to complete the vaccination, the first dose, offer a vaccination to the next 5 groups.
Thank you. And is Wales the first country in the UK to meet this milestone of offering the vaccinations to everyone in the first 4 groups? We've heard a lot recently about the Welsh Government saying Wales is first in a few areas when it comes to the pandemic, but we haven't heard anything today about you being the first with this. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I'm just anxious to avoid the narrative that this is somehow a competition between UK nations. I've said from the very beginning, the contest is between the injection and the infection. You know, our race is with coronavirus. Now, we are the first nation in the UK to have reached this milestone. Other nations will follow in the next couple of days. We're not in competition with one another. Every part of the UK is working as hard as it can to get to these milestones because of the astonishing efforts that have been made by Dr. Lewis and all her colleagues and all those people who support those frontline staff. We're able to say today that we'll have reached that milestone by the end of the day and into the very beginning of the weekend. But the race is not with other countries in the UK or elsewhere in the world. The race is to get as many people vaccinated as fast as we can so that we can begin to see this dreadful experience, as I say, in the rear-view mirror rather than one that is always ahead of us. Adam, diolch yn fawr. Over to Mark Smith at Wales Online.
Thank you very much indeed, both. This is a question addressed to the First Minister. Many members of the public and indeed business owners in areas like hospitality will be desperate for more lockdown restrictions to be lifted given the much lower infection rates and testing positivity rates we've seen in Wales. However, the latest scientific guidance given to the Welsh Government by the Technical Advisory Cell warns of exponential growth in infection rates if lockdown restrictions are lifted too quickly. So my question is, how do you balance the sobering advice you've been given by the TAC with the growing desires of people to have many of their freedoms back?
Thank you, Mark. Well, look, what we will rely on will be the positive way in which people in Wales last year supported the careful step-by-step approach we took to lifting restrictions. The anxiety that our scientists point to is this, isn't it? Is that we now have the Kent variant, the dominant variant of this virus in Wales, and its transmissibility is much quicker than the original version. So what we don't know is as we start carefully and cautiously to lift restrictions, we don't know how this new variant will react. Whether even a small uptick in the number of infections might accelerate away from us even more quickly than would have been the case last year. And that's why they urge caution on us. But as we, and I hope when I'm standing here next week, I'll be confirming that the foundation phase are going back to school, and if there's anything else, and if there is anything else, it will be very modest indeed that we can do. We will monitor that as carefully as we possibly can to see whether the conditions of the new variant give us cause for concern. And that's the balancing act. And I think people in Wales will understand that. Nobody will want us to throw away all the efforts that people have made since before Christmas. And we will not do that. We will look to restore freedoms in a way that continues to secure our safety against coronavirus and its latest developments, while always wanting, as safely as we can, to restore the freedoms that we have all been missing.
Thank you very much indeed for that answer. And my second question is probably more directed to Dr. Lewis. Now that everyone in the first four priority groups has been offered a vaccine, are you able to give us any insight into what areas of Wales the take-up has been lower? And is any work going on to understand what the reasons for that might be?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, absolutely. And one of the really important aspects of this campaign is our use of the Welsh immunisation system, which allows us to capture really good data contemporaneously so that we can understand where uptake is lower very, very quickly and seek to act on it. So as I said earlier on when I was speaking, we must make sure that there's no inequity either because of geography, rurality, ethnicity or any other reason. So I know that my colleagues in all parts of Wales are working to look at that data and then quickly leap on it and understand the reasons should there be any reduced uptake and seek to change our plans to meet the changing needs of the population so that we reach as many people as possible who wish to have the vaccine and we don't leave anybody behind.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Over to Dan Bevan at LBC.
Thank you, First Minister and Dr. Lewis. Good afternoon to you both. My questions are more directed towards yourself, First Minister, but Dr. Lewis, if you'd like to chime in, then please feel free to. This lull in vaccinations that you're talking about being planned and expected, the people of Wales will only be finding out about it today or yesterday when it broke in the media. When did you find out about it, and why are we only talking about it now in these briefings?
Well, first of all, Dan, I wouldn't use the word lull, because there will be thousands of people next week receiving their second vaccine, and there will be thousands of people in those new 5 groups who will also be called in for vaccination next week. It is a small and temporary reduction in supply. I was keen to make it clear to people, because I've always thought that the more we share information with others, the more people understand how the programme that is run on their behalf is going. People have been rightly concentrating on completing the first 4 groups of vaccination. That's where people's interest has been. Those are the figures people have been looking at every day. Now that we are completing that part of the programme today and into tomorrow, I thought this was the right moment to explain how the next 5 groups will be dealt with. A temporary and relatively small fall in volumes next week across the UK in order to put factories in a position where we can have even more of the vaccine in March and April. And I think once people have understood that this was planned for and is for a purpose, people will understand that it will help us in the final ambition of getting those extra 5 groups done by the spring.
Just before I go on to my second question, Minister, can I just ask again, when did you find out about this, as you say, this dip in vaccination, just so we know how much notice we might be able to get next time?
Sure. Dan, I'm trying to give you as accurate an answer as I can, looking back over the week. I have a weekly meeting with the team who are planning the vaccination programme in Wales. The meeting this week took place on Wednesday afternoon, and that is when I would have been provided with the information that I've been sharing with people yesterday and today.
Thank you. And in reference to your answer to Rob from ITV, you say that you want to get back to similar sort of measures as in the summer. And although back then we did have a lot more freedoms than we do now, still a lot of things that we couldn't do. You couldn't go to a sporting event, couldn't go to concerts, and there were still a lot of measures on things like hospitality, social distancing between tables, etc. Are you saying that those types of measures could well be in place for the foreseeable to the end of the year, let's say?
No, I was answering Rob's question, which asked me what I thought the new normal might look like, and was explaining that, you know, in the first instance, if we could get to where things were this last summer and get to them earlier in the year, that would be a significant achievement, and that people would notice real differences in their lives. At the moment, we can't travel. We were able to travel then. Now we're not able to meet people beyond our own household. We were able to do that then. We can't go on holiday at the moment. We could do it then. We couldn't go out to eat. We can't go out to eat now. We could do it then. You know, life was significantly different, and if we could get back to that, that's not where it ends, of course. But that would be, in answering Rob's question, where I thought the new normal was heading. If we could get to that, I think people would notice the difference, and that would give us a platform to move on, provided things continue to improve, to restore other freedoms and other important things that, of course, I know people miss every day. Dan, thank you very much. Drosodd i Hywel Griffith, BBC News.
Diolch yn fawr, helo eto. First of all, First Minister, you've given a pretty clear signal today that you hope tourism can resume in Wales, potentially from Easter onwards. You know, in other parts of the UK, ministers have advised against booking holidays. What do you say to people within Wales, but also outside of Wales, about whether or not they could book a holiday to come here in the spring?
Well, what I say to them is that they should do it knowing the uncertain world that we are living in, and that there are no guarantees in this. Nobody can offer them a guarantee. You probably will remember how well that when we reopened tourism last year, we didn't go from nothing to everything in one go. Our first steps were to reopen self-contained accommodation, where people had all their own facilities, where they weren't shared facilities, and that self-contained accommodation was occupied by people in your own family group. So, you know, I hear everything that the tourism industry says to us in Wales. I want to recognise how important the Easter period is to them. And I've tried to give an indication today that if everything continues to improve, we will do what we can to respond to their wish to be able to resume trading again over the Easter period. Nobody should think for a moment that that will mean a wholesale reopening of that industry. And anybody who is booking ahead needs to do so in the full knowledge that the improvements we are seeing at the moment, nobody can guarantee that things will continue in that way.
We're talking about unlocking and this potentially being the last lockdown, but can you confirm that behind the scenes maybe officials have to consider the possibility of other lockdowns later this year, potentially a lockdown again in the autumn later this year? You wouldn't want to confirm it, obviously, you don't know what will happen, but can you confirm that is a working possibility in long-term planning?
Well, I'd say to people, just look what has happened in Melbourne overnight in Australia. There is a city hosting the Australian Open tennis tournament, expecting that to go ahead, which is suddenly back into a 5-day circuit breaker. That's how fast you can go from being in a relatively promising position, as we are in Wales at the moment, to things being very difficult again. Of course, the Welsh Government prepares for all eventualities, and nobody could rule out something unexpected happening, a new variant from somewhere else in the world that gets into the United Kingdom and causes us a new set of difficulties. To take the most obvious example, nobody should rule out, nobody could say that lockdowns are guaranteed to be a thing of the past, and a responsible government always has to plan for all eventualities, and that is what we will be doing. Hywel, diolch yn fawr. Over to Steve Bagnall at the Daily Post.
Thank you both. My questions are probably directed to the First Minister. With schools set to reopen from February the 22nd, we've heard concerns about whether teachers will have the correct PPE to ensure safety. Are you able to guarantee they will be getting the protective equipment needed in time for young pupils returning, and the school environment will be safe to return to?
Well, we've been working very hard, Steve, with the teacher unions, the non-teacher unions, and the local education authorities to put into place all the safeguards that we can identify. We want our young people to be back in school. They've had a terrible year. But of course, that must be done in a way that is safe for them and safe for staff as well. We've identified additional safeguards as a result of the last couple of weeks' discussions. We'll be offering twice weekly lateral flow tests to staff in school. We've provided £5 million in additional funding to our local education authorities so that they can provide higher grade face coverings, for example, as additional protection. We continue to be in discussions with our colleagues in the teacher unions and in local councils. And if there are further ideas that allow us to strengthen those protections further, then of course that is what we will do. The supply of PPE will come not directly from the Welsh Government. We fund the local authorities so that they've got supplies and the supplies are there for them. They will then provide those onwards for use in schools.
Thank you. And with cases of the South African variant appearing in North Wales, we've seen one on Anglesey now linked to international travel. Is there any update on investigations into where a case in Conway may have originated? And have there been any further cases of that variant or other variants detected in North Wales?
Well, see, the last time I was briefed on this, which was yesterday, there were no further examples of the South African variant anywhere in Wales, including North Wales. We know of 13 cases. 11 of those have already been explained and are linked to travel from South Africa. In 2 cases, that investigation continues. And as of yesterday, that is, as you know, a North Wales case and a case at the other end of Wales. Those investigations hadn't been completed, but no additional numbers anywhere in Wales. Steve, thank you to Rob Taylor at wrexham.com.
Good afternoon, First Minister. In North East Wales, Wrexham and Flintshire have had similar case rates and have been trading the dubious title of being the worst in Wales. This week, the 2 local authorities have taken contrasting action on school reopening. Is Wrexham's caution the right option compared to Flintshire's choice? And do you support such localised decision making?
Well, we said in the very beginning, Rob, that we would have a partial, phased and flexible return to education for our 3 to 7-year-olds. And the reason for offering flexibility is that circumstances are different in different parts of Wales, and even between local authorities where the raw numbers may look similar, the on-the-ground arrangements, the size of classes, the age of school buildings and so on differs between one location and another. It was the deal we did with our local education authorities that they would have that flexibility. I am confident that every local authority is thinking very carefully about what is right in their set of circumstances. I'm glad they've got that flexibility. All of that is being exercised against the background of a strong, agreed position between the teachers, the local education authorities and the Welsh Government. We all want as many young people back in face-to-face education as quickly as we can manage it, but as safely as we can manage it. And those circumstances will vary in different parts of Wales.
Thank you. And Dr. Lewis, someone who works at local GP surgery, told us that they have the capability to vaccinate at a greater speed if they had the vaccination supply to do so. Is that a fair reflection of what you see on the ground? And related to that, First Minister, Welsh Government have published vaccination programme data entitled Stock and Distribution, but it doesn't actually contain any data on stock or distribution because it refers to the UK Government asking that vaccine stock data is not published due to current commercial sensitivities. Are you able to explain what those commercial sensitivities are?
So I'll go for Sally first.
Yes, thank you. Well, I was on a call with 4 GP cluster leads, 4 GP leaders from North Wales last night, and I can tell you that nobody is more anxious than my GP colleagues to be part of the vaccination campaign. I mentioned when I was speaking earlier about the mixed model that we need to use and how we distribute supply and get vaccine to the priority groups in the most effective way, and how important it is for local health boards and primary care GP practices to be working together locally to plan the best way to do that. And as we see the supplies really start to come through now during the spring, I'm sure that I've got absolutely no doubt that GP colleagues will be working very hard, vaccinating as hard and fast as they can. What I would also say, though, is that in rural areas of North Wales, as you will know, people are a long way from urban centres, potentially a long way from mass vaccination centres. So the onus will be falling very much on GP colleagues to deliver large parts of this programme. So again, that collaboration across the system is really important, and I know that people are gearing up for those increased supplies throughout the spring.
Sorry, thank you. And Rob, I am frustrated at the fact that I've now discussed this matter for 3 weeks in a row in the weekly call we are now getting with the UK government and the other First Ministers. Very glad that we are having that reliably every week, every Wednesday. But we've had 3 weeks worth of discussions in which what I want to do, I think, is quite simple. I want to be able to publish retrospectively, not looking ahead, but looking at what has already happened. I want to publish 3 figures. How much supply of vaccine has been available to Wales? How we have distributed that out to GP practices and local health boards? And how much have we residually retained at the centre in case there are any problems in any part of Wales and we've got to provide some additional supply. I struggle to see what is the commercial sensitivity in doing that, but our UK colleagues have continued to have some anxieties about it. I'm hoping that as a result of Wednesday's conversation, we will have an agreement by the start of next week, and then we will be able to publish the information which we have and which, as I say, because it's historical, I'm just struggling a bit to understand why it would be sensitive in a commercial sense. As soon as we have an agreement, we will publish. Rob, thank you. Over to Thomas Moody at the South Wales Argus.
Thank you, First Minister. I wanted to ask first about the 16 to 64-year-olds at risk group. Is there a sort of sub-priority list, as it were, where people with more serious underlying health conditions are prioritised, and with asthma sufferers as well included in this group? Is there a priority for people who take oral steroids, or people who have to over people who have to use inhalers?
Tom, I'll just make one general remark, and then I might go over to Dr. Lewis to explain some of the more sort of clinical approaches to prioritisation. I think one of the things we will see in the next 5 groups is that in order to get through the volumes that we have to get through, we won't be going just 5, 6, 7 down the line. People will be being called in for vaccination across the 5 groups. And that's because we have so many hundreds of thousands of people to vaccinate that the system will need a bit of flexibility to make sure that every single appointment can be kept, every single dose of vaccine can be used. So I think we're going to see a bit more fluidity between the groups than we did in the first 4, but that will be to make sure that we complete the vaccination programme as fast as we can for everybody. In relation to the people who have some clinical vulnerability, I'll see if Dr. Lewis can help with that.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, the only thing I would add to that really is that, of course, we want to immunise the most vulnerable first. And and, for example, those who may be severely immunosuppressed, we would want to try and reach those people first. We have to go by the guidance of JCVI, of course, but I know that also colleagues here in Public Health Wales are working through those clinically vulnerable groups to do just that sort of assessment that you're talking about.
Thanks very much, Lewis. Thomas.
And I just wanted to go back to the temporary reduction in supply that you mentioned earlier. Will this mean that people receiving their second dose of the vaccine will be prioritised over the next few weeks? And does that mean that people in the next 4 groups shouldn't be too concerned if they don't get their vaccinations right away? And is there any update on when the Moderna vaccine will become available in the UK and Wales?
On your middle question, I think people shouldn't be anxious. Our promise is we will get through all 5 groups by the spring, and that is what we will do. There's always going to be somebody who is first, and there'll always be somebody who will be the last person to be vaccinated, but everybody will be vaccinated within the time frame that we have set out. We are going to use the supply of Pfizer vaccine that we have for the second doses of people who've had their first dose, because there's a time limit. You can only have so many weeks before that second dose is necessary. In many parts of Wales, the system we've had is that when you have your first jab, you get the appointment for your next one. So people will already have those dates in their diaries, know what time they've got to turn up and where to go, and we will be honouring all those appointments. On the Moderna vaccine, I have not seen anything further beyond the original announcement, which suggested that we would start to get a supply of that vaccine by toward the end of April of this year. And as far as I know, that remains the intention. Thomas, thank you. Over to Matt Jones at the County Times.
Afternoon, both. First Minister, the tourism sector is worth more than 800 million to Paris and supports more than 11,000 jobs. Can businesses in that sector expect to be able to open for the key points of this year, or will they face a second year with next to no revenue?
Well, I want to recognise again the importance of the tourism industry in many parts of Wales. It's a foundational part of the economy in many areas, which is why I have said what I've said in recent weeks about working positively towards an Easter date, provided that the conditions allow that to happen. Now, as I've said a couple of times this afternoon, the situation can turn from benign to difficult very quickly indeed. Looking ahead from where we are today, where the number of people falling ill with coronavirus is at around 100 per 100,000 people, where the positivity rate is down below 10%, where the number of people in hospitals is beginning to reduce. If that was a straight line into the future, there would be things that we could hope to do for the tourism industry in that very important part of the year. The problem is that nobody can guarantee that it is a straight line into the future, and the industry understands that. I've met with the industry a number of times over the last 12 months to hear about their concerns and to share ideas about what we can do. We will do our very best, but the opening will have to be careful, it'll have to be cautious, and it will have to be something that can be supported in the public health context of the time. And that's many weeks away from us, and impossible to be more certain than I've tried to be today. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. And second question, again, this has been touched on already today, but it's obviously something that people are quite concerned about with the winter months ending and sort of lighter days on the way. But people have been in lockdown now for some time. It's been probably the most depressing period of coronavirus. Is there a target for them to aim at when they can expect to see things opening up again? I know you've talked about Easter, but is there maybe a more specific date, or perhaps a date when you would like to see
well, the key dates,
this
I think,
normality, the new normal.
Of course. Thank you. Look, I think the key dates for people to think about are the 3-week cycle that we use for reviewing the coronavirus regulations. I'll be back here on Friday of next week with the outcome of the current 3-week review. There'll be another review 3 weeks later on the 11th of March. So those are the key dates for people to look at. That is when we will be having to make these very challenging decisions, balancing the absolutely understandable wish of people to have more freedom, to be out of their own homes, to meet with family and friends, against the overriding need to maintain vigilance against this virus, not to throw away everything we have achieved in these difficult months by doing things too quickly and seeing the virus come flooding back again. That will be the judgment we will be making. We'll do it on that 3-week cycle so people have got certainty about when decisions will be made. And I will always come here and make sure that the first people who know about what we're able to do are people here in Wales. Matt, thank you. Over to Tom Magner at Carers World Live.
Thank you very much, First Minister, and good afternoon, Dr. Lewis. I'd like to hear from both of you on each of my questions. Can I firstly say our viewers don't doubt your commitment and welcome your news on the pace of vaccination, but nevertheless, there are concerns. So as a background to my first question, I've investigated an issue with the lack of free or public transport to and from the Bay Field Hospital near Swansea. I've also looked into viewer concerns about potholes across the car park causing wheelchair access difficulties. I'm pleased to say the Swansea Bay University Health Board have dealt with those issues. So what assurance can you give that there are no, what I might call Swansea type issues in the other 6 health board areas, including the Newport Cumbrian Centre, for which I understand, Dr. Lewis, you're operationally responsible?
Well, I'll ask Dr. Lewis to deal with the specific, but look, in general, Tom, this is a programme that has been mobilised at astonishing speed. I said this is the 66th day, so that's all we've been going, 66 days, and week by week we are adding new venues to try and make it more convenient and more possible for people to take up vaccination. We're using premises we've never used before, and there are going to be places where some things are a bit rough and ready to begin with, and then we can improve them. What helps us most of all is to hear the actual lived experience of people who tell you what it's been like to go somewhere. Because just as in Swansea Bay, I'm sure that once the system is alerted to issues that need to be put right, everybody will be keen to do that. And intelligence from the ground, the people who are actually turning up for vaccination, is probably the most valuable intelligence we get in order to make sure that if there are teething troubles anywhere, we put them right as fast as we can.
Thank you, Minister, and hello, Tom. My role in Cumbrian and Newport is as a vaccinator and providing medical supervision, but I do know that the Aneurin Bevan Health Board, who are responsible for the operational running of those centres, would have a very nimble approach to any problems that people have encountered in either getting there or having any difficulty when they are physically there. So just as Swansea Bay did, and just as the Minister has said, we need to address these problems as they crop up. Some of that is down to the speed of the rollout, of course. It's bound to happen. But the second part of my answer, I suppose, is important because we recognise that not every setting is suitable for every individual, and that's why having a mixed model of vaccine delivery is so critical, so that if a mass vaccination centre is not suitable for an individual, they will have other alternatives, for example, at a GP surgery or other setting. And that's a really important consideration because we need to understand people's needs if we're to meet those vaccination targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll be sure to keep you in touch with any developments. I'm grateful, First Minister, for your reference to unpaid carers in your opening statement today. And a couple of weeks ago, you agreed that unpaid carers would explicitly be included in the main text of Band 6, aiming to end confusion over where unpaid carers in Wales sat in the priority list. These processes obviously take time, but as late as yesterday, our viewers were still seeing Public Health Wales leaflets without the correct wording. What update and assurances can you both give that unpaid carers are not going to be forgotten or their needs excluded in the push to vaccinate? Some of our viewers are saying they fear they might be considered vaccine hesitant when that is far from the truth. Thank you.
No, thanks very much, Tom. Look, any new material that we are producing, we are making sure that we took up the points that you'd raised with us and making the information more explicit. It's inevitable that there are some leaflets still in circulation from prior to when those changes were made, but I can assure you that what the Welsh Government wants to see is anything new we produce is produced in a way that's as helpful as possible to people, and it's been very useful to have heard from you and carers organisations to help us in that regard. Look, we want people to come forward. It's been a real theme of this afternoon. Anybody who feels that they may have been left behind, now is the time to come forward, because we want to make sure that that offer of vaccination is with you. And it's a really important point that Dr. Lewis made, which I'm keen to re-emphasise. If you've been made an offer that just isn't suitable for you, please don't think that you've got to take it because you won't get another one. All you have to do is explain that that doesn't work for you in your circumstances, and we know that unpaid carers will always, very often have complex circumstances they have to navigate. If that offer isn't the right one for you, let us know, because there will be other possibilities and you will never be disadvantaged because you need to have a response from our system that is responsive to your needs and your circumstances. That's how we want the system to run. I understand that people are hesitant, are fearful, are afraid that if they make a fuss, as people think, that somehow that's the wrong thing to do. Actually, we'd much rather know, because then we can get you the service that you need. There we are. I think Sally's agreeing with that. So Tom, thank you very much as ever for raising those points. And last of all today, over to Andrew Nuttall at the Leader.
Thank you, Minister. This has already been touched on by, I believe, Matt at the County Times. You'll know how important the hospitality and the tourism sector is to various parts of Wales. It is quite common here in North Wales as well. We've spoken to several businesses over the last few weeks and indeed months that continue to have some concerns that even though they've had financial backing, they're just keen to get their doors back open, doing what it is that they love to do, as to serve customers and make their business a real go of it. Can you commit to sort of publishing, like we had in the summer, sort of roadmap ideals as a rough guide for these businesses, so that they've got some sort of time frame or date in mind as to know that they can expect reopening? Or if they're not going to get something like this, is there a way that they'll get sort of similar notice like schools have had in the last couple of weeks?
Okay. No, thank you, Andrew. I'm glad to hear that the firms have had financial backing, but I know absolutely that they'd rather be trading. They'd rather be earning a living than waiting for a Welsh Government cheque to arrive. So you will know that on the 14th of December, we published our coronavirus control plan with its 4 alert levels. We've committed now to refreshing that plan, because the plan was drawn up before the new variant was known about and before the vaccination programme really got underway. So we are going to go back, check that the plan is still fit for those new developments, republish it, because I think it will give people the best indication we can. As you know, it tells people what can happen at each of the 4 levels. It tells people where the virus will need to be in order to move to those levels. And in an uncertain world, I think it is the closest to giving people a plan for the future that we can sensibly offer at this time. And I'm hoping that that refreshed plan will be published, before very long at all.
Thank you. And sort of shifting back towards schools and going forward, should people expect nothing but limited relaxations to be made on a wider scale for the general public in the short term until all school pupils are back in the classroom? And then sort of in an ideal world, when do you hope to achieve that goal, if you were, of all pupils back in the classrooms? We've had about 12 months of disruption now to their education, and I suppose in general, their general childhood, and that they can never get back, I suppose.
No, look, those are really important points. You're only a child once, and what our children and young people have lost is not just education. It has been everything you get from growing up alongside other people of your own age, which is why the Welsh Government's continuing top priority is to get young people back into face-to-face learning, starting as we are with the very youngest children, looking to see what we can do for those young people who are facing qualifications where face-to-face demonstration of the skills that they have acquired has to be part of the way that those qualifications are assessed. We announced over £25 million worth of additional help for the further education sector this week. And that is because the further education sector is where many of those young people are to be found, people who are learning trades, and where it's a mixture of classroom learning and practical demonstration of the skills that you need. So I wish I could give a more definitive timetable that I'm able to do on this, as many other things today. It's a really important start on the 22nd of February. We will need to make sure that we learn from that experience because of what I said earlier about the transmissibility of the new variant. But as soon as we are able to demonstrate that that has been a success, we will build on that further, get more children back into face-to-face learning. It will not be like it was before coronavirus ever happened. It won't be every child back every day in every classroom. We're going to have to be more flexible and more imaginative and creative than that. But I'm very encouraged by the way in which our trade union colleagues and our local education authority colleagues have come around the table together with us to contribute those ideas so that we maximise the scope we have to put the needs of those young people first and to begin to restore some sort of normality into their lives. Andrew, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for today.